This is what my first year of game development looks like. It was August of last year. I wasn't doing anything with my life at the time, so I decided I was going to start making video games. But because I have no experience coding or making games, I had to do a bunch of research online and watch a ton of YouTube videos. They helped me come to the conclusion that it was probably best to start this journey by learning how to use a game engine. Game engines are cool things because they provide a lot of the underlying code and the physics environment you'd most likely need to create a video game, as well as a visual interface to make it easier to navigate. So I took the plunge and downloaded Unity. This is what it looks like. Simple, right? So I installed Unity and finished my indie dream game 3 weeks later. I'm kidding. I don't have dreams anymore. Also, making games is pretty hard. What I actually did was spend the first couple months just trying to wrap my head around how Unity works and what it even means to make a video game. I thought I had some abstract idea, like I knew I had to type stuff somewhere, but beyond that, I wasn't really sure. So I did what I always do and went back to YouTube. I watched hours and hours of game dev videos. It's so cool and inspiring to watch people talk about their projects and the techniques they're using to make them. Some developers even go into detail about different coding principles. But I still had no idea what they were talking about really. Game objects and references, scenes and components. I realized I still needed to learn the very basics if I was going to get this train moving. So I did some more research and came across a book on Amazon called Introduction to Game Design, Prototyping, and Development, From Concept to Playable Game with Unity and C#. At last, I found a resource that took me step by step through how to set up a Unity project and how to connect a code editor to it. The book laid out the code necessary to get a few small games up and running, so I painstakingly made my way through the material, going back and forth between the pages in my editor to copy the code line by line. And to my astonishment, it was working. I finally had a couple tiny game prototypes that I could fire up and actually play. I was amazed. It felt like magic, wonderful, magical magic before my very eyes. But there was still one problem. I didn't know how this magic was working. When it came down to it, I still didn't understand what each of the lines of code was doing. I did learn one important lesson from this process though. When coding, just like with magic, there can be no mistakes. If you forget even one bracket, one semicolon, you're toast. You're crustless jam and a toast. Anyway, I was excited that I got something working, but I was still feeling a little lost when it came to coding overall, especially when I tried to make things on my own without using a tutorial. So I went back to my trusty YouTube, where I could at least bask in the glory of other people making progress on their games. And that's when I came across a video by this guy named Pontypants, where he was talking about how he learned Unity. He said he followed a Udemy tutorial put out by GameDev.tv. My interest was piqued, to say the least. So I bought the tutorial and started my way through it. The course took me step by step through how to plan and create a few small games. Things were clearly explained, and there were little coding challenges I had to complete before I was handed the answer, so I learned to think more critically about what was going on. After working through this course, I finally felt like things were clicking this time. At this point, I had a handful of small prototypes working, and I was pleased with the progress I'd made. However, there were still some fundamental gaps in my understanding of C#, If I haven't said this before, C# is the language that Unity uses. But rather than feel discouraged, this time I was excited to fill in those gaps of understanding. So I purchased a few more Udemy tutorials on C# that weren't Unity specific. These turned out to be very helpful in tying together some basic concepts that I'd missed. So 1 year after starting game development, I'm at the point where I have a pretty solid understanding of the fundamentals of Unity and C#. I've now begun work on my first original, tiny game prototype. It's a basic game where you flip cards and try to match their colors. It may sound simple and boring, but that's the point. My plan is to start really small and slowly build up to working on more complex games. To sum it all up, I'm seeing where there's probably not one approach that will teach me everything or provide me with all the tools I'll need. I'm gonna have to jump back and forth between watching tutorials, watching YouTube videos, reading, Googling things, and just trying stuff out on my own. And I've come to accept that learning to code and make video games is gonna be a continual process. But that's okay, because the difference after 1 year of game development is that I'm excited to learn new things and the challenge doesn't feel as overwhelming. I know I'm on my way to creating larger, more interesting games, and if I stick to it, who knows where I'll be in another year.